just getting into GovCon, you don't know your elbow from your hand, so to speak. What we want to do is put you in touch with the right people. First, you have to get a very good attorney. And if you don't have one, I strongly suggest that you find a good attorney that understands, one, government contracting, but two, the requirements of being a government contractor. So you get that you don't fall into any of the pitfalls, like you said, paperwork wise. And the second thing is an ERISA attorney that understands benefits for government contracting. I'm not an attorney, right? So we work with a lot of great attorneys all over the country, and we've picked their brain and spent a lot of money to get their influence to help clients so they don't have to always go out and spend money with an attorney. But what we tell people all the time is step one is get an attorney that can help you with the paperwork and get paid properly. Step two is if you have any legal questions around HR or benefits, we can help you, but put you in touch with an ERISA-based attorney that knows this space. They will absolutely keep you out of the fire because they have the legal background for that.
Welcome, everybody. You are watching the next episode of the Construction MF'ers podcast. My name is Scott Peper. I'm the CEO and founder of Mobilization Funding. I've got a great guest here today with me. We are going to tackle government contracting, and something in construction is always focused on government contracting. There's an avenue to it. There's a pathway to it, doing private work or government work or doing some of both. There's some key differences, and understanding those is very critical to success. With me today, I have Jim Campbell, who is the founder and CEO of AXIM, and they will be able to describe exactly what those things are, how they can help you. And Jim is the founder and started it at all, and he's going to be the perfect person for us to get into it. So, Jim, welcome to the show.
Appreciate you having me. Thanks, Scott.
Absolutely. So tell me how you got started with AXIM and what it is. Let's get right into it.
Yeah, the long and sordid story. Look, I was an infantry Marine that got hurt. I had no formal education. I didn't finish college. I was sitting here as an adult in the Metro DC area, rather, as an adult that didn't have a job and was physically incapable of doing a lot. So getting back on my feet was an issue, one, but two, I left school to be an infantry Marine. So, starting with no education as a background too was another hurdle. But I had a buddy who worked in insurance in Baltimore who said, "Hey man, this carrier came in and said they're looking for people that were good at math and thought of you. And I know you need a job." So I called this recruiter number, and the lady said, "We're looking for somebody in actuary sciences." I said, I don't know what that is, but he said, "You have to be good in math." So long story short, took a test. I got a call. They said, "Expect a call like 3 weeks later. We'll let you know." Within 3 days, I got a call from this guy. And he said, "Hey, look, we're looking to build out our network here in the Metro DC area for XYZ carrier. And we'd love for you to come aboard." I knew nothing about, one, actuary sciences, or two, sales of insurance. Know nothing. Put me through a great training program up in Minnesota at the headquarters of this company and learned a lot. But I realized real quick that the corporate world wasn't right for me. And there was a bigger world because I was working with benefit brokers in the Metro DC area that were making a ton of money. Again, infantry Marine, not a lot of money, coming out of, pretty much being disabled. And the lot of money kind of resonated with me. So I was like, I can do that. Decided to become a benefits broker and went to work for a gentleman in the Metro DC area, Bethesda, Maryland there. And he taught me a lot of great lessons. One specifically was how to work hard, and learned a lot from that gentleman. And we did really well together. But one thing I noticed was like my as I got a little bit more mature and, the Marine Corps and all that stuff started to kind of get out of me a little bit. And I started to rehumanize, so to speak, and reintegrate into society. I realized what I was doing had a massive impact. People buying insurance isn't just buying insurance. They have to use it. And unfortunately, some people really need to use it like every day. And I was like, man, there's got to be a better way than this transactional model. And at that time, it was kind of weird crux in my life, is like everybody was talking about Service Contract Act, Davis-Bacon Act, the requirements, the compliance, legal, this, that, and the third. And I'm not an attorney, obviously. So I went out and met really smart attorneys in that space, kind of pulled the pieces together and was like, man, I'm going to focus here. I know what I know on the benefit side, but this GovCon thing, this government contracting with specificity around Service Contract Act and Davis-Bacon Act for construction, I'm gonna focus here. So in 2009, I decided I'm going to go out on my own and I'm going to become a government contractor. I went and registered to become a government contractor. To this day, AXIM is the only registered service disabled veteran-owned small business in contracting. But my idea was to never have a direct government contract. It was literally to go to school to understand how the CFOs made money, lost money, where HR people were having holes, and fill them with my knowledge from the benefit side, and really be that bridge between the benefits industry, the brokers, and the people they're trying to sell to, right? Let them speak English to one another as opposed to GovCon and benefits, right? Because they're two distinct worlds.
Well, for someone, if in case someone doesn't know what the Davis-Bacon Wage Act is and those requirements and laws, just give a quick brief overview of what that is and why.
Yeah, sure. So the Davis-Bacon Act is all new construction sponsored by the federal government. So you can think of highways, bridges, roads. Right now, the Infrastructure Act, Build Back America, was billions of dollars in infrastructure rebuilding across the country. So construction companies all over the country are bidding on these contracts to do this work. Even if they're commercial, if they take any of these projects on, it becomes a Davis-Bacon regulated act. And that means you have a mandated wage for the job being done. So you could have a bricklayer 1, bricklayer 2, so on and so forth. There's a specific wage table. And that wage table has a carrying what they call health and welfare amount, fringe benefit allotment. So you have a wage and a fringe allotment for every hour worked that you have to pay that specific job. Now that's all determined by the local area that the work is being done in, typically by county, so by state and by county. So it's very, very tough to track all the responsible wages, to make sure that you're paying the appropriate fringe rate for those wage terminations. And then if there are any updates, God forbid you miss one, making sure that you're updating and then staying in compliance. So in that wage determination world, a lot of companies, your point, like they could be commercial companies that have been doing this work for a long time. They get into GovCon, they're like, whoa, this is more than I want to take on. I don't want to handle this paperwork. I don't want to do this level of detail. I just want to pay my guys and gals cash and walk away from it. Fortunately, that's not always the issue or the opportunity. And you have to provide benefits if you get to be a certain size. And moreover, now on the contract, especially with the Inflation Reduction Act, that a lot of companies are going for in the green energy sector, benefits are mandated, right? So you're going to have to change your business model. That was what I wanted to help companies in the Metro DC area all those years ago focus on, and now we're nationwide doing it.
So in our world, we work with a lot of government contractors, and I think one of the biggest things we hear from folks trying to get into government contracting or saying, I don't want to get into government contracting, is because they think that it takes the government too long to pay. Is that true?
I wouldn't say so, no. As a matter of fact, I think the stability for the government paying is a way to then use that as a baseline for your company. And I would say even not in construction. I know this is a construction podcast, but let's say you have somebody that's doing demo work. It's still a construction company, but that falls under a different act in government contracting called the Service Contract Act. So like it is a great way to do what you do and formalize a base for your company. But you got to realize there's some construction companies that only do federal work because now let's say they're 70, 80 years old and they're massive companies. They need subcontractors, right? And you're not going to go tell one of the big name firms across the country, no, I'm not going to take on work, because they're going to lead you to more work if you do a good job. So if it happens to be in GovCon and you're not familiar with what that means, that's the kind of, you pump the brakes a little bit, ask a couple questions, but don't turn away the work because you will get paid. There's a requirement in the contracts that requires primes to promptly pay their subcontractors. There's also subsets of government contracts that require the government, to return invoices or turn invoices within a certain amount of time.
So what typically delays payment then?
Oh man, here we go. So I'm gonna get my ass chewed for this one, but like at the end of the day, it could be a myriad of things. You don't know how to write an invoice. One, you don't know how to collect money from the government. Two, right? Like these things are kind of self-imposed, like gunshot wounds, self-inflicted gunshot wounds to stop you from getting paid because you just don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You didn't write your contract right. You didn't sign on the section F liability section right and delayed paperwork. That could be the start of it. I think another thing too is if you're a sub to a prime, you're so excited to get the work, you didn't do the due diligence in that teaming partner to say, you need to pay us X. I'm small business, mid-sized business. I can't float your overhead or your labor or your materials. And that's what people miss, right? Like you get excited to do the work. You're like, yeah, we got it. I heard this guy on Construction MF'ers podcast. He said the government pays. Great. That guy's full of shit. No, they don't.
Yeah.
Right? It's just that you didn't know how to bill or get paid properly. And you have to make sure you kind of tick and tie those things before you go into the work.
Well, you're spot on. And if you're going to get your ass chewed, I'll stand next to you because I'm going to tell you what I see all the time. And in our business at Mobilization Funding, we lend to all kinds of government contractors to execute the work. But the biggest thing that prevents us from doing a loan or partnering with a company to execute work in government contracting is if they haven't done it before and they're not aware of the paperwork. Because what slows the government down from paying is actually subsection F wasn't checkmarked properly. It's like all administrative and like it's very much paperwork driven. And if you don't have the administrative discipline, understanding, and you haven't surrounded yourselves with all those other little professional services that like the accountants, the lawyer, the paperwork, and you haven't invested in those, and you're sort of just kind of like treating it the same as you might your commercial path, private work path. You're going to have things that like open up in front of you and holes that you're going to fall into that will delay payment 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And those are those things that then create a performance problem, but it really wasn't a performance problem. It was an administrative problem. So I agree with you 100%. And the reason why I was so excited to have you on is because I wanted to drill down on this issue, that the majority of issues in government contracting stem from or are completely self-inflicted.
Absolutely. And I would say that the government, look, they're the biggest company in the world. The US government's the biggest company in the world, bar none. So out of the trillions of dollars spent, if you're a construction company and you want some of this Infrastructure Act or the Inflation Reduction Act money, it's gonna be $30 trillion in the next 30 years. Think about that number. Construction companies all over the country now want a piece of this, whether it's solar, wind, greening up a building or whatever it is. It's all over. And there's so many companies that want a piece of this, but they have no background in GovCon. I would first say, to your point, find somebody that's done it. Get the basic steps down of what needs to be done. Because once you have those covered, the government doesn't really miss in the baby steps. They miss when people miss the baby steps and go to step 2 or 3 and forget all about step 1. That's when things, like you said, get botched up and it's self-inflicted wounds. But if you find somebody that's done it, can be somewhat of a mentor. As a matter of fact, there's a ton of small business liaison companies out there funded by the government just so you don't miss. They're free. Like they have people that worked at the government, worked at an agency, will help you fill out those documents. And it costs you $0.
That's right. One of the things I want to talk to you about too is even the government is funding organizations like the Veterans Institute of Procurement to help teach and train, which we'll dive into. But before we do that, talk about AXIM. And now that we have addressed some of these problems, how have you and AXIM and the company you've created and your products and services, how do you help a contractor who wants to get into GovCon or is in GovCon, but maybe they're growing and scaling bigger projects faster? How can they plug in and utilize your services to help them succeed?
Well, there's a number of ways, but let's start out first. Like you're just getting into GovCon. You don't know your elbow from your hand, so to speak. What we want to do is put you in touch with the right people. First, you have to get a very good attorney. And if you don't have one, I strongly suggest that You find a good attorney that understands, one, government contracting, but two, the requirements of being a government contractor. So you get that, you don't fall into any of the pitfalls, like you said, paperwork wise. And the second thing is an ERISA attorney that understands benefits for government contracting. I'm not an attorney, right? So we work with a lot of great attorneys all over the country, and we've picked their brain and spent a lot of money to get their influence to help clients, so they don't have to always go out and spend money with an attorney. But what we tell people all the time is, step one is get an attorney that can help you with the paperwork and get paid properly. Step two is, if you have any legal questions around HR or benefits, we can help you, but put you in touch with a ERISA-based attorney that knows this space. They will absolutely keep you out of the fire because they have the legal background for that. Step three then is, when we get integrated, our job is to help you build your internal systems, whether that's a cost accounting ERP, built for GovCon or built for construction, a payroll system, whatever it is, build your current systems right. Doesn't take a lot. There's no extra expense. It's making sure that you have it built so that you can calculate what we're going to need. We're going to need to interact our system with your current systems to track by employee, by hours worked, by benefit elected. That's what the government wants to see. They want to see without a shadow of a doubt that you displaced, not only paid them the proper wage for the job they were doing, and you can prove it in payroll, but then they earned that health and welfare by that specific wage termination, and you were accounting for it every single hour. And then the benefit that it went to. And if you're a company that uses cash just because you want to get a job done, or that's what you feel the demand is, understand that the impact of the applicable taxes and the cost overruns that you don't get reimbursed on are going to hit your bottom line. And a lot of companies come to us and say, I never knew that. Holy mackerel, I would have made money on that contract, but I didn't want to work with the government again because I thought I was going to lose money on every contract. Back to your earlier point, self-inflicted wounds, you didn't pay attention because you didn't ask the right questions. It costs you $0 to find me or somebody else on LinkedIn that gives away a ton of free information and simply ask a question. I don't send you a bill, right? We're not charging up our attorneys to fire up the machine, the bill printing machine. It's like, how can we help you? And there is a nice little pocket, especially on LinkedIn, for GovCon, specialty, small business specialty. There's a lot of us that contribute a lot of information, and doesn't cost you a cent.
No, you gotta just consume it and then put it into action. So as you talk about payroll and the information there, is all of what you described, is that the same thing as a certified payroll?
Excuse me. No. So running a payroll is actually just taking hours in. The certified payroll is the proof, the stamp that those employees were paid out on a weekly basis in the manner commensurate with the contract requirements. Now, here's a funny thing about GovCon. You could be under a weekly pay, right? If you choose to make cash in lieu of benefits, meaning you don't offer benefits or you take a piece of that health and welfare and offer it to cash, you have to make those available funds from the health and welfare available on the next check. So what you did was you took your estimated payroll, you increased it by this cash in lieu of for this health and welfare, you increased your payout or your actual payroll on that date. You also increased your workers' comp rate. You probably didn't take those two factors in when you were doing your budgeting and your planning. And all of a sudden, now you're out of whack and you're upside down, and you got to call Scott and say, hey, mobilization funding, I need X. When if you would have known that up front, you would have properly budgeted, or you would have increased your cost. And a lot of companies that we've talked to, they go into GovCon once, to your point, the maiden voyage, and they made those mistakes and they say, I'm never doing it again, or now I know what I should know and I'm ready to do it again, but I'm going to ask all the questions up front. So to avoid that first hit, maybe second hit, because like me, you're not a smart person and you just keep taking beatings, you want to avoid that as much as possible. And really understanding what certified payroll means that you have certified that those people received every dollar they were supposed to within the requirements of the government, and you made all available wages, and now cash in lieu of wages or cash in lieu of benefits available on the next available check.
Yeah.
Whether you have the money in the bank or not, government doesn't care. That money better be with the employee.
Yeah. And if someone's listening to this right now and it doesn't make any sense, this is the exact reason why you said you got to get a good attorney right out of the gate. This is
100%.
also a reason why you hire these professional services to know what you need to know before you enter into it. Because if you just go into these things, you can figure it out the old school way. And look, by the way, I learned the same way you do, Jim. I beat my head into the wall, usually more than once, but not more than twice. I get the lesson. And so I've sort of learned my way around it as I've gotten through the years to just hire these folks now because it saves me. But what kills companies is if you do that, like you and I have learned these lessons the hard way, but you do it with a large project or one that's a little bit above your jump, which seems to be the typical method for someone who wants to get into something new. You always try to jump into something big. That's where you can get really crushed. If you are doing something small, you take a nice little small, $50,000, $100,000 project that's much smaller than whatever your normal size project is. You can learn some of these lessons. Have a catastrophic failure on a $50,000 project is a lot different than a catastrophic failure on $1 million project or 2 million or whatever large is for you. And so there's some other advice. If you're going to learn the hard way, learn it on something small so you don't get destroyed.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And the funny thing is, a lot of the companies out there that would start in GovCon, again, are going to take they're going to work for a GC or a prime that's been doing this for a long time. And that prime's not going to hire you if they think that you're just a wingnut and you're going out there and you really have no clue. They're going to hire you because you have a good reputation in the commercial world, or you've proven your version of past performance over the years to go out and do a job in GovCon. To your point, if you're probably going to start small, you're not just going to be able to jump into the $10 million awards unless you're highly specialized at something. Perfect example of that is we had a client who's a big roofing company in Texas. They had an opportunity to do fairly large projects for one of the national name firms, and they had not done GovCon before. And these are, big buildings on a military base, and it required security clearances and all that stuff. And as they were getting ramped up, the first question that the CFO asked is, what questions am I not asking that I should? And I was like, you're a smart dude.
Yeah.
Right. And his in-house counsel didn't know. So again, not being an attorney, I was like, these are the people that you want to talk to. And I knew everybody in the Metro DC area, introduced him to a gentleman. And the gentleman's like, the attorney goes down this list and he gets to, what do I need to talk about my internet security for? What do you mean? Like my network security? And he's like, well, if it's weak and this thing could be hacked, you're liable for potentially, leaking government data and information. You're going to have to work on your internet security or your network security. The CFO is like, I'm a construction guy. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But it was a big enough project that they made the investment. Good thing they did, because when they got their audit, one of the first things that was asked was like, how are you exchanging files? And it's like, oh my God, we're glad we called that guy. It was like, saved them, because it was one of the first questions that was asked.
Yeah. And something like that will withhold payment. They could
until you get it fixed. And this was a big project, man. This wasn't a small company going into a big thing. It was a big company that was taking on a big project. So, you're probably talking north of $5-6 million right out of the first shot. And they had to do multiple of these. And he's like, I'm glad I called that guy.
And we've talked now for 15, 20 minutes on this topic, and we've talked about some of the negatives. But it certainly could sound scary. But the reality is, this is just an amazing opportunity for contractors that know how to perform work. Because look, it's construction. Some of these projects, some of these sites are more difficult than maybe a traditional site, but the majority of them are the same type of construction. You just have to execute it. But it's a little bit more than just executing the construction project to be successful. But yet, by doing the little bit of extra effort on the administrative stuff that we talked about, the payroll stuff, maybe hiring these attorneys, professional services, accounting, in some cases, even your internet security in advance, the trade-off is payment and not having to worry about payment, and maybe actually realizing that you can get paid a lot faster in the government, because many folks will qualify for 15-day payment or 30-day payment, or you can even get mobilization costs paid to you up front inside government contracting. There is a ton of opportunity in government contract that it does not exist in the private world, but the buy-in, so to speak, is understanding the administrative burden and hiring these professional services and making that a little bit of an investment in your time and energy first, and cost and capital, to trade off some of these real advantages. And I want to make sure that we talk about some of those. Maybe you have a success story you could share, Jim, with someone who maybe had some of these perceptions, got with you, maybe they got with you on accident, or luckily, or maybe they were really strategic and planned it out, and maybe they've made now a 2, 3, 4-year run, and you could talk a little bit about a success story, what someone else could.
100%. Oh, I mean, look, I mean, one in Ohio sticks out in my mind because they had done state and local prevailing wage jobs for a long time. I mean, very well-known company in a a less than desirable type job. Remediation services is not something that's highly sought after. But when you're the company that can go out and fix whatever XYZ problem, and they want to build a highway over it, if they're going to call you, they're not going to bring in somebody from 5 states away. So the company was very trepidatious about getting into GovCon because of all the things you had talked about. Took their time, understood the requirement. We introduced them to a person to help them with their bids and proposals that understood GovCon for construction, right? So DBA work, help them fall into it. Here's what you guys know really well with all of your systems, using your Procore, your Vista, or whatever Viewpoint systems. We understand that. Here's how you have to build your rates. Here's how you have to deliver the job. And here's what you should bid. They do it. I think they paid $3,000, whatever it was, and get off to a phenomenal start. Now, 5 years later, we started with 30 people on a project. Now they got 410 people doing GovCon. They've doubled the size of their business. It's a legacy business. It's 50 plus years old, handed down. It's the second generation now. And, now it's 600 plus people working for this company, when they had 90 when we first started. Yeah. And they built their business not off just the traditional work. GovCon has accelerated that business, 5-fold, 6-fold.
See, what I love about that story too is, like, think about the entrepreneur. Everyone talks about that journey. They grind this business out, they get to it. Then there's a second generation that comes in and takes over a business. And oftentimes their buddies are beating them up like, oh yeah, you started on third base, or I didn't get all the stuff you got, and that person sort of struggles. Meanwhile, running a business as a second generation is still very difficult. It might not be the same entrepreneurial journey, but it has its challenges. And I think that version of an entrepreneur always struggles a little bit with, how do I add value, or how do I become worth? And you know what? Hearing you tell that story, this is a phenomenal path. If you're a second generation owner of a business in your family, like, getting into government contracting, being your legacy, can tremendously add value to that existing business. And that's something that wasn't done in the first generation, and that's something you can do. And if you want to make that your mark, like, great example right there.
Well, a lot of those skills are transcendent too. So what you had done in the past to build a family reputation will now carry into this next generation of required services. So again, I go to the Inflation Reduction Act for green services. Just because you're laying roads or you're doing whatever in a region doesn't mean that you can't look at the green alternative and find a way to make your legacy services apply to the next generation of services needed.
Right.
Because it's still going to be there. I mean, we talk to electricians all the time. Oh my gosh, guys that were low voltage guys that are going back to school after 20 years to do some of this high voltage stuff, and broadband towers and all this other stuff. They're reinvigorated. They're saying, man, I was doing, low grade electrical work. I was making good money, but now I've got this government contract doing, electrical work alongside of my other work, and my firm is blown up because of all these new requirements that are, coming at us through government contracting.
Yeah, it's interesting how the parallels of a desire and goals and what people are trying to accomplish in the new year or the new phase or whatever. And government contracting and these big infrastructure bills, people are trying to figure out, how do I take advantage of it, or how can I get into it? And a physical act of getting started is so difficult sometimes to figure that out. You
100%.
just start bidding things. Oh, I hear a lot of folks like, I'm just going to I applied for the 8A program, and they think automatically you got to get into 8A. And, I had another another guest on the podcast talking about the 8A program. His name's Eric Coffey, and Eric was like, you know what, more work is done outside of the 8A program than inside the 8A program. And
Yeah,
inside the
Eric's
8A
great.
program,
I follow his stuff all the time.
yeah, he's like, inside 8A program, that like 90% of it is done by inside the tribal community. So if you're not even, you can just be a subcontractor to the tribal communities without getting into 8A. And so
Right.
it's like, there's so many misconceptions about government contracting. And I love what you said. There's so much information out there on LinkedIn and YouTube, yours, Eric's, whatever we can offer out there, that you should go get educated, because there's so many ways to get into government contracting without thinking the traditional couple ways that you have to, and you can be very, very successful.
Yeah, well, I mean, candidly, that's how I got introduced to you. Mutual friend Matt Stavish. You guys are in the financing business. I know nothing about financing or banking, but what I know is that you know it really well, and our clients need to be attached to folks like you all to be able to deliver these jobs. Because if you're new and you're getting into the space, you don't know how to bill, you don't know how to receive. You have to figure that out. But if you've done it 1, 2, 3, 4 times and become more efficient at it, like you said, you open the door to those opportunities, because now the likelihood of them defaulting or not being able to pay back on time has gone way, way down. It doesn't just look good to you as a partner, though. It looks good to the larger companies that need more work filled.
Yeah.
That past performance becomes just key, and it does not come from the 8A world. It does not come from the small disadvantaged business set-asides. I'm a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business. I've never gotten one offer thrown at me to say, hey, come fix VA healthcare. They don't do it. You have to go out and get it. But once you get there, it is so stable, and it becomes a great solid base. And there's so many companies that started in GovCon, believe it or not, and then created a commercial division because of their stability and their growth in GovCon.
Yeah. When you're known as a performer in government contracting in your space and specialty, you'll eat for days and years and years and years. I mean, getting
That's right.
started is hard, but when you're known and built a reputation of just consistently doing your work, your paperwork is great. You can separate yourself from the competition inside your bids, inside your area, more so than any other place, especially more than a private world. Same thing on price. Yes, pricing is competitive, but when
Yeah.
you are in certain specialties and you're known as a performer and you've done that work before, you're going to win awards. Like, it's just
They'll just come to you.
they're
Yeah,
going to
they'll
come to
come
you.
at you. And you're right. You're gonna have to eat some margin. There's no two ways about it. It's not, the government's not overspending on services, right? What they're doing, what we found is that years ago, when low price, technically acceptable LPTA was the buzzword in services, everybody was dive bombing rates and the work performance suffered. That's gone away by and large on the construction side of things. They want people that can deliver solid quality work and repeat, right? And that's all over this country. Whether you're building a building or a tower for a new runway, or the runway itself, they want people that they can watch and repeat, that have good past performance and have proven it, whether it was in the commercial world or GovCon history. They want somebody with history that can perform that work and get it done properly.
Yeah.
And it's not always going to be massive overruns on profit, but it will be steady work and it will be profitable if you can manage the back end.
Yeah. And Jim, let me ask you a question. Do you think the government bidding process, going through the RFP process, the specificity that's in it, does it help a contractor make sure that the actual bids that are put in are more uniform than maybe a commercial or private environment would be? Meaning, because they're so detailed, the folks that are bidding on it can't leave something out. They can't,
Yeah.
they're all going to be more consistent, more uniform. So you can't have someone put this super low bid in that because they missed something. Like it has to be, it's so detailed. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, 100%. That's come out since what I was talking about before. The way that you do your buildup or your cost buildup shows every way that you're going to apply these dollars, right? And if you say, I'm not going to have any overhead, I'm not going to have any back office, I'm going to maximize profit, they're going to say, no, it's not realistic.
Yeah.
You're not a good fit for us. But what that also does for you as the contractor is it shows like you can't cut out certain things. And it makes you more lethal on your commercial side of your business because you know how to get lean, you know how to be efficient, and you can probably extend margin on the other side of your business that's not GovCon. So there's definitely ways that GovCon and that defined nature of submitting a bid can make you better on other opportunities.
So you touched on financing and cash flow. And obviously we focus a ton on cash flow and financing in our world, as well as accounting, financial services, and even attorneys. I've had multiple attorneys on this podcast and done webinars with them to just try to help folks know that there's like 6 or 7 things that you can negotiate on a contract that you should, and it can put you in such a better position if something bad were to happen.
Yep.
And that that's so true in the government world as well. But transitioning to cash flow and financing, do you find that most government contractors are well capitalized going into a project? Do they understand what capital they need? Are they familiar with the options that are out there? Like what is the world in your eyes?
I'd have to say no to all the above things that you said. They're not well capitalized. Everybody's really fighting inflation right now. The cost of everything's just more expensive. Life is more expensive. And to deliver that, obviously, when goods and services are more expensive, you probably didn't budget for it properly because you want to be lower. You want to be looked at as being a good resource. So I don't think they're well capitalized. I don't think that they think about it properly going into a contract, and I don't believe they know their options. This is something that we consistently come across, whether it's construction or non-construction. In government contracting, I find that often to be the case. This is particularly in the last 18 months. With the country going through what it's been going through, and they say that we're not in an inflation period or a recession. I don't know who these economists are because everywhere I go, everybody's talking about the same thing. I don't have enough money, I can't grow, and I need to find a way to get more cash.
Yeah.
But then I also hear there's over $3 trillion sitting on the sidelines to be invested across the world. And private equity, venture capitalists, so on and so forth, banks are holding back those funds because they're worried. So I don't know where these economists are coming in because every company I talk to is really looking for a way to be cash flush or have resources to cash in order to grow their businesses.
Well, you and I can have a whole different episode on why that's all true, what you just said.
Yep.
And I happen to believe that it was by design that way. But so the one other piece I want to talk to you about is you and I got introduced by our collective friend Matt Stavish, who's a great person, by the way. If you don't know Matt, get on and follow him on LinkedIn and his group and Republic Capital Access. They're great, especially in the government contracting world. And if you're not bonded, they're a great option for you. And I know bonding and government kind of go together in many worlds, but there are a lot of things that are not bonded in the government space that you don't have to have a bond for. So talking about that though, when you're thinking about your clients and they're getting ready to execute the work, they've done the attorney work, they've gotten themselves set up, they've now won this bid, and all of a sudden they're like, you know what? I got it. It's this great $2 million award, or it's a $500,000 award, or whatever. And the payments cycles are good, and they're working for a great customer of theirs, and they're going to either a prime or they are the prime. And now they have to execute it. And they're like, Jim, what do I do? Like, I don't have this much cash. I don't have how do they go about figuring out what kind of cash they need? Do you guys run those numbers for them? Like, how does that problem present itself, and what solutions do you see out there?
Yeah, great question. So again, we work with a lot of great folks that can help in the bid and proposal world. As it pertains to construction, we can fill in the parts around the benefits and the wage determination piece. So when you get a requirement in any opportunity in that RFP, they're going to list the type of work that needs to be done. With that, in construction comes that wage termination table. We find out what work that you're applicable for. We can pull those out, extrapolate it by the hours requirement of the job, right, in the bid. And then you work with people in the professional space that do bids and proposals, and we give them our piece for that. You're talking about maybe $1,000 to get that estimate, to help you with a proper estimate that could potentially win you a couple $1,000,000. You know, you got to figure out what your margins are, but it's not a large, like everybody thinks it's really laborious and it's crazy. It's not anymore. It's not. I mean, it's days, not weeks.
Yeah.
And you can turn around proposal after proposal, but you can also make sure that you're going to make money out of this thing. Don't go into a blind. You can actually do all the prep work and be covered, like be protected. And I tell people all the time, I might not be the guy to give you the whole answer, but like you said, we know enough people, you can get the whole answer very quickly, very inexpensive, and you're protected. And that's the thing, right? You need to be protected.
Yeah. I mean, like, have a little bit of, just check your ego, talk to one person, tell them everything you don't know, let them help you. And all of a sudden now you're perfectly positioned to actually succeed. And like you said, some of these little investments sound like they're so expensive, but they're not. $1,000 gets you a great bid. It secures it for you. Make sure you know you're going to be profitable. But what it also does is it taught you what a great bid looks like. And now you can implement those systems and those processes across everything else you do to make sure that you're not missing a line item cost or a line item fee that's going to eat you alive. Where the cash flow comes in, you know, we talked about this when you and I first met. We have a project cash flow tool on our website. We used it to analyze loans. We ultimately had so many issues with every customer that we ever came to with cash flow. They would bring the issues they don't have cash flow, that we said, you know, let's just give this cash flow tool out to everyone on our website. So you can go to our website, mobilizationfunding.com, download this project cash flow tool, just so you have a tool that you can use to see, like, how much on this project I have, do I actually have to invest into it before I'm cash flow positive? Like, you know, you're profitable, you know, you have all your costs covered, but what you don't know is, when will I actually be cash flow positive? Because executing that job with the cash you need when you have to make the payments to your subs, your suppliers, your labor, your bonding, whatever it may be, and when you actually get paid are two totally different ballgames. Profitability
100%.
and cash flow, they tend to exist in the same sentence, but they are definitely on opposite ends of it. And so knowing that and knowing that information up front is really critical. And I think that's part of the equation. So having all of your costs, then knowing how you have to spend them, coupled with when you bill and invoice and get paid, knowing what that dollar amount is you need. And it's not always covered in just traditional lines of credit that you may have, or maybe you're growing so fast, or maybe you have multiple projects starting at the same time. Just because you have financing doesn't mean you're weak or broken. It might mean you had 3 primes delay projects and they all start at the same time. And now your company's acting like it's got 300% growth because it's really 3 projects that were supposed to start perfectly, one in January, one in March, and one in June, and they're all starting in June. You know, like, that's not your fault. So, but being comfortable knowing that and having the right tools and people around you to make sure your bid's right, your costs are covered, and then you have the right cash flow to make sure you can execute it so that you do make your profit. That's the key.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, at the end of the day, I kind of joke with one of our CFOs consistently, because we're pretty good buddies at this point. And I said, how long did the planning take to you for that? They just won a massive award last year. It's like a 5-year award. And I said, how long did it take for you to guys really nail that down? How many review teams and all this other stuff did you have? He's like, now that we got the process down, it's been easy.
Yeah.
He's like, we've got the process covered because we made that investment all those years ago. Now it's wash and repeat. Like, the team's really good at it. I'm like, there we go. Like, that's kind of what I want to hear, right? Like, you guys learned, and the great thing is they're prime at this point. They're teaching their subs. They'll tell their subs in their teaming agreements, you have to work with X to cover ABC. We can't work with you if you don't do this, because you're a compliance liability to us, or you're a financial liability to us.
Yeah.
And their subs start out as small companies, they're growing because of benefit for it. So it's just a couple of years ago, investing the time. Now they're bringing other companies along to not make the same mistakes, and they're killing it.
Yeah, and there's two ways to think about that when you come across a prime that puts that kind of requirement out. Who are they and why are they telling me what to do? I can run my own business. Or you could say, maybe they know something, they're just trying to help me be successful. I mean, you got to determine that. But to me, what you just described is someone who's growing as a prime, finding a lot of success, trying to bring subs along with them and making sure those subs are successful. And yes, of course, it helps them for you to be using the right professional services and people, but it also helps you, which means it'll help them. It doesn't mean
Oh
it's not
yeah.
one-way street. And so I think finding a prime that's willing to do that kind of stuff and even mandates those in a contract is usually not someone who's bad. They're actually someone who's trying to help you. And even because they're making a contractual requirement, maybe that's the push you need to be successful. But look at it as a positive, not a negative, I think, is just some advice I would offer.
No, I can completely agree with you, because it ultimately is, if you can help them be more successful, like you're going to be going along for the ride, right?
Yeah.
Like big companies aren't in the business of failing or being associated with people that fail.
Yeah.
So they want to be surrounded by people that listen and want to go north. And they typically will take you along for the ride if you're willing to listen.
Yeah. I mean, look, they're not trying to meet new people every time they start a project.
That's it.
That's for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. Jim, this has been an awesome conversation. In the spirit of the wonderful CFO that you complimented earlier, one of my favorite questions is, what questions have I not asked you that someone needs to watch, watching this now needs to know and should hear?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the biggest thing is, compliance, compliance, compliance. The Department of Labor has ramped up all of their efforts as just recently as October of this past year of 2023 to make sure that all federal contracts of Davis-Bacon related acts, DBRA, and the associated acts, meaning service contract, absolutely that if you're doing a government contract, you better understand the Davis-Bacon requirements. You better, because the Department of Labor will be investigating your award. They're going to want to make sure that you're paying those wages properly, you're paying the fringes properly, or you're applying the benefits accurately. That's where AXIM comes in, right? So we know what they're looking for. We've built the systems and done all the things. We're not asking you to switch systems, buy any new benefit structure. We know every broker in the country that does this business. We know every attorney that you should talk to in this business. Let us help you, right? Let us help you stay out of trouble, because without a doubt, you're going to get audited if you get an award in the next coming years, because the amount of money out there that's in the infrastructure bills they're just massive dollars, and you're going to want to be a part of it, but you want to make sure that you have your bases covered before you do it. So please just reach out.
Especially if you're successful. They're definitely going to fund.
Yeah, God. Yeah. Hey, if you're losing money and your employees are all taken care of, they don't care. If you're successful, yeah, pack a lunch, right?
Yeah. So tell everybody, how do we find you and how do we find AXIM? What's the best ways to get in touch with you and understand the content you put out? Where can everyone find you?
Yeah, regardless of what people think, I'm not a ghost. I actually exist. So LinkedIn, Jim Campbell, it's just Jim Campbell AXIM. You'll see me. We give away a ton of free content on LinkedIn under the company pages. And then obviously our website is AXIM, AXIM, FSG, so Fringe Solutions Group.com, AXIMFSG.com. And again, give away a ton of material. We work with great partners like yourself. Like I said, the financing folks, the legal folks, the bid and proposal folks. If I don't have a resource at this point for GovCon, then it probably doesn't exist.
Nice. I agree. And guys, go out and support Jim. He's doing some great work out here. Him and his company are in the business of helping you. They have a great service. We've learned a lot here today. Hopefully we've touched on enough information. My hope is we've touched on enough information here today that will trigger someone who wants to get into government contracting or is in it already to make a phone call. And if for no other reason, just figure out what you don't know. I'm sure the cost is going to be inexpensive for you to make that phone call to figure out the information. So Jim,
Always
thank
happy
you
to
very
help,
much,
and
man. I
thank you.
appreciate it very much.
It was a good time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll have to do this again. Well, maybe what we'll do is we'll have to get on a few folks come on and maybe share some of their stories next time. It might be the next episode we do together.
I I have a couple lined up that would love to do that.
All right, good. We'll get that scheduled next.
You got it.
Everybody, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please share the show. Click subscribe on our YouTube channel. Go to Jim's YouTube channel, click subscribe there. Follow us both on LinkedIn. I'll make sure all the information to connect with Jim is in our show notes. And I wish you all the best and God bless you. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Take care, man.